Well, buckle in, everyone. We're going to talk about Dr. Tamago today, and we're going to be talking about two specific deck lists for it that we're going to update for the changing Diva meta game. So, without further ado, let's just get right into it. Now, Dr. Tamago still remains with its genuine role of being a control deck. You're trying to shut down a lot of what your opponent's doing, and as such, then moving forward with kind of getting to the late game, making them discard all of their cards, and having it so that they're only playing 2 cards a turn, which naturally will leave 1 lane open for you to attack through and start dealing damage into. If you guys want a better breakdown as to what Dr. Tamago does and its role as a deck, everything I pretty much said in the first video is still pretty valid, so definitely take a check that out on the channel, and it'll give you a better breakdown of it. I'm just going to move forward as if you know that already, because you're updating the list from the last time around. Now, Dr. Tamago's stall still pretty much stays true to its roots. You'll notice that there's basically no cards that have been added from the new set in Changing Diva, and that's because realistically, if you wanted to go more of going more into Changing Diva, you're going to want to go with more of a freeze option that I'm going to talk about in a second here. But you want to do something like this for walls if you're just trying to be a walls deck. Everything's pretty much stayed the same. I've shifted a lot less green into the build and added a couple more tech blue walling options. The big changes here are going to be that you're still running your end game punch of Robin Hoods as well as the Fenrir's, right? The Fenrir's are your really good beginning of end game, trying to make them finish out their discarding. You're using still the freeze too in order to combo with Great Reversal, and then popping some lanes open. And then if you have to get really late game, then you're going to want to start using the Robin Hoods as a way to lane clear and get it so that they're running out of resources. You also have just a general pretty good wall here in Arcwain. Shadow gets better and better as the series goes forward. As there's more things that target, Arcwain just becomes a better and better wall. And then mini Arcwain, Zhao Yung from that end. There's a lot less freeze emphasis here. We've only got 1 freeze card in Neo Tetra, just because it's a generally good life burst, where it downs a Signy and freezes it, and then gets you to draw a card. But you've got other things that are better in the deck, namely that you're actually leaning on these multicolored to sort of get you to where you need to go. Multicolors are great because Nova Dirty can pick them up pretty easily and put them in your hand. That's why there's such a weird variety of like the blue white ones, the white green ones, and the green blue ones. It's a weird mix that basically ensures that you'll have a smooth early hand with Nova Dirty. We're also running 3 Falcolors. These things are amazing. They are very, 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 very good against No Limit. They are just a solid wall against No Limit on its own. And then the life burst of being able to down 2 Signies on the opponent's field can basically just end a huge attack from No Limit side of the field. So you'll be running 3 of them. If you could fit a 4th in there, it might be worth trying to do. I had a little harder time trying to fit in all the things that I wanted from it. Quinn just gets you a little bit away to getting yourself closer to the end game. I've been less impressed with it, just because I think the metagame has adapted against it, which is why I went down from 3 copies to 2 copies. And then Natural Planet has been very, very good. Helium Natural Planet. Being able to if this is Vanish outside of battle, being able to down target Elrig on your opponent's field, it very rarely uses this ability, but it lane clutters very well because no one wants to trigger this ability, with the exception of Card Jockey. They don't really care about it too much. And you're still cleaning up the game with Robin Hood. Now, Robin Hood, again, has a high ceiling and a pretty bad floor. So you want to make sure that when you Robin Hood, they really are exhausted out of options, because you don't want to get blown out when you attack with this and then have flipped your other guys over, and then you don't get to attack at all. This is an older version of the list, and I think it's still quite good. Bang to Capo still does its job against No Limit, for example. And this is sort of teched to just be very balanced against the entire metagame. So if you find yourself playing against a lot of different decks, then this deck could be a very good starting point for you to just try stuff in and then tweak as needed. I have a different version to be showing, and this is going to use a lot more changing Diva cards. This is basically a spells deck, quote-unquote spells matters deck in Wixoss, as well as freeze. It's interesting because the 2 and 2 kind of go hand in hand. It's not necessarily that you are trying to necessarily make freeze work. It's just you have a little bit left of the deck once you go that spells route, and a lot of the spells happen to do freezy stuff. So at that point, you end up going the freeze route as well. So the freeze, there's a lot more freeze options here, but it's not overwhelming how much freeze options. The biggest change here is that you are running a combo of Chandelier and Royal Blue. Now, if we talk about Chandelier here, Chandelier more or less says as long as there's a spell in your trash, then not only is it 13 power, which is pretty big, it also, when it kills things, it doesn't go into the enter zone at any point in time. So it doesn't trigger, for example, things like Xenocluster, but it also is enter depriving of them, right? You're not necessarily, you're enter starving them with this. And that goes hand in hand with Royal Blue. Once I find Royal Blue, I will click it. Trust me, I just am blind. Here we go. Royal Blue, which says that on the attack turn, right? This is an action, so you gotta go ahead and use this before you go into attacks. That's very important. You can choose target frozen Signy on your opponent's field, and it gains at the beginning of the attack phase. You can either vanish this Signy unless its owner pays colorless. Inevitably, if you are enter starving them, which is something that you're in the business of doing as Uchu, then this colorless becomes a very, very real cost for most decks. And so you have less need of lane openers in green, and you can shift that more towards just being a genuinely good lane opener in blue from this. So that's the main draw of the deck. There's kind of some push-pull between Archwains and Chandeliers because they're kind of similar in the role they function, except Chandelier is a little bit more aggressive. But what frees it now is that we have access to Spinning Harmony. Now, Spinning Harmony is not a good spell by any stretch. You need to freeze 3 different targets in order for it to become Random Drain, and then it is good. Random Drain's a good card. But the fact of the matter is that it does not have a life burst, which means that you are finally free to run Chandelier and spells because you had a tension between the fact that Chandelier has life burst and spells had life burst, so it was tough to pack them all in there. And since you're running something that is a freeze-oriented thing, not to mention that Random Drain does a freeze effect on its life burst, so you get more freeze effects, it just starts pushing you naturally towards this freeze thing, which also allows you to run Great Reversal a little bit easier than in the other deck, because you'll have more reliable options for it. I've got 2 Snow Mayus here, and let me pull that up so that you guys can read it. Snow Mayu only freezes the center lane. You gotta remember that when you're doing life bursts, and when you're doing other, like, your opponent can use that knowledge to their advantage. For example, turn 1, the opponent's probably going to put, if they're smart, they're going to put it on the left lane and the right lane and keep the center lane open so your Snow Mayu is less powerful. And then they might just put things in the center lane that aren't going to attack, so that way your freeze is less optional, like good of an option. But this is a straight upgrade to Bradamante. Now, Bradamante had the ability to at least make your opponent discard cards, which I liked. But this at least is not just dead on its own like Bradamante was. You drew Bradamante, you didn't have freeze, it was just dead. This at least does some amount of work. Even though its first ability, where it's you can then target, if there's 2 frozen things, you can target one of the Signies, put it on the bottom. That is not an impressive thing. You're not really using it for that. You're using that as a incidental nice thing that happens often, but realistically you're using it because this, and it doesn't have a life burst like Neon Tetra does. So it allows you to put more freeze in the deck without having to worry about life burst. You'll see a very strange selection of green cards here, and the reason why is because you still need to run Bang to Capo, and I fully believe that 6 is the right number to pay for a splash. And you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards that will do that. This is also the right number of white cards to run, the bare minimum white cards to run to hit with Nova Dirty at a reliable amount. So it is much more of a blue deck, and the enter is better, but you need to prioritize making sure that you're not using your green immediately. There's some other tech options in here, like Coyotes, just being, I needed more freeze, just 1 more freeze, and the Life Burst also does a freeze, so it's pretty good. And then Muzuka, let's see here, Muzuzuku, Phantom Terra Beast. I actually see a lot of people wanting to play this in aggressive decks, and the more and more I use this, more and more I'm like, this is built for control decks. It attacks under, which means that it deprives the opponent of enter. And so what, if they kill it, then cool, you've just enter charged again, and you weren't planning on really doing anything with that lane that turn anyways. And it enter charges on attack. So it's basically just a pretty free enter charge at level 2. I don't know if it's right. Maybe it's better to run some other thing at level 2 that's green. I could be persuaded that this is not the right call. But I think it's a pretty good option. If you guys need to tweak things as you can during your metagame, feel free to do so. And that's more or less the updated version of the Dr. Tamago deck. I think it's still worth talking about some tech options here. We've got Flopsy. I think Flopsy's, if you're feeling like you need more card draw, basically that's what Flopsy does, right? Whenever it attacks, you can either add a Signy from your enter zone, so if you're enter flooded late game, basically just allows you to keep drawing cards, or you can enter charge, right? And that inevitably is also pretty good because the deck can be tight on enter sometimes. He Natural Planet, like I said, you're running it in the other version, but this is just a very strong wall in general to play against everything that's not named Card Jockey. You've got Gi Natural Element, which is just, it's got an okay life burst here, vanish target up Signy, and also enter charge if you can't vanish something. And then it also has the ability to destroy something and get yourself some more lane openings. I don't think it's fantastic, but it's fine. Robin Hood we talked about again. You can always add Robin Hood, but you do need to add a little bit more green into the deck in order to have Robin Hood function. You're really only ever going to use Robin Hood once. It's not a great card, and you probably should be using it as a max of 1 of or 2 of in your deck. It's just an option. Quinn, we talked about this as well. It's just a good way to make the games go longer and kind of annoy attackers. Stand Up, if you wanted more different types of spells, Stand Up is a pretty good one to get some Guard Recursion back into your hand. Guard Recursion is actually pretty good in Tamago because the games will go long enough where they will make a difference to add some Guard Recursion. It's just difficult to add more spells with Life Burst, so I've cut it. I was running that and Trouble for a while. Bradamante, we talked about. If you decided you've got enough sources of freeze that you want something better than Snow Mayu and you don't need the freeze on Snow Mayu, then Bradamante will be doing the job for you on that scenario. Trouble, like I said, is just I would play this as a 1 of, probably. It's got a really good Life Burst down up to 2 Signy on your opponent's field. You don't get to draw a card, which stinks. But for 2 enter, drawing 3 cards will pretty much win you the game against any slow or controlling mid-range deck. So it's a fine tech in that scenario. You have Sir Sinus. Watch me fumble through card names. Sir Sinus. Yeah, sure, whatever. It's a compass. It'll allow you to... It's just a good level 2 filler if you need to basically just say, I want to put a wall down. I know it's going to get killed, but at least it will draw me a card, and that will do the job here. It's just a fine filler on your level 2 slot if you need it. This is an interesting one, and again, this is something that potentially you could replace the level 2 green that I was running with. If you have 6 or more cards in your hand, which is a real requirement, but is doable in Uchu, you can pay a green if you do this gains Lancer till end of turn. I think inevitably the death sentence of this card is that it requires you to have 6 cards in hand and also pay green, which is tough to do in just an Uchu deck in general. But if you were running more of a green-blue build than a green-white build, this is definitely doable and an option and worth talking about. And of course, I'm running Great Reversal, but you could run Xenocluster instead of Great Reversal. I think the Great Reversal is necessary for the lane opening, but that doesn't mean that if you really are just grinding people out and then getting to that natural they draw to fill out 2 lanes and you have 1 lane opener because of that, then inevitably this is a fine option to do as well. It feels like I'm a broken record always talking about this, but it is a good idea to use this if you feel like you have a lot of Madoka or other Uchus on your side of the field and you need to replace the cards that they've taken away from you. So without any further ado, guys, I hope you may always flip a life purse. Please subscribe if you guys want to see more content on Wixoss, as well as see more sample deck lists.